There's treasure, there's adventure, there's exotic locales, and danger at every turn. What could be a more thrilling combination? A life at sea as a pirate, that is. We think of pirates as rough and ready scalawags, swashbuckling rogues who plunder ships and pillage coastal towns. But what if I told you they were also master merchants with savvy business sense? Most people don't realize that pirates ran some of the most successful businesses in history. Their empires may have been built on pillaging, but they also had legitimate sources of income. And one of their most profitable trades was surprisingly pearl. In this episode, we're going to set sail for uncharted waters to uncover the truth about pirates, pearls, and plagues. The golden age of piracy is generally considered to be between the years 1650 and 1730. During this time, European powers like Britain, France, Portugal, and Spain all colonized the Caribbean and amassed huge fortunes from their New World colonies. The riches of the Spanish alone are almost unimaginable. Between 1522 and 1601, they shipped over $40 billion worth of silver back to Europe. Today, nearly 90% of the world's silver still comes from beneath the surface of the earth. But back then, it was a different story altogether. Silver was extracted by hand using extremely labor-intensive methods. This meant that the cost of extraction was high, which in turn drove up the price of silver goods. But as a result, the precious metal became a popular commodity for colonial authorities to transport across the ocean. And here's where our entrepreneurial buccaneers come in. Though piracy had been around for centuries before, it really took off during the 17th century when ships became bigger, carrying more riches than ever before. And because of the size of these vessels, they needed to be protected. Pirates offered their services as privators, basically licensed pirates. They would protect merchant ships from other would-be pirates in exchange for a percentage of the cargo. The best known of these providers was Henry Morgan, who after racking up massive fortunes pillaging on Spanish shipping lanes was granted knighthood and became lieutenant governor of Jamaica. He's widely credited with making piracy respectable. But while privateering was officially sanctioned, it was often hard to distinguish them from pirates because many of these entrepreneurs used their commissions as cover to steal as much as they possibly could for themselves. This led to an arms race between navies and pirates. As ships got bigger, so did the boats used to hunt them down. And soon, pirates found themselves fighting not just for treasure, but to stay alive. Enter the pirate pearl. It all started in the early 1600s with a series of Chinese fishing boats called the Red Fort. They were built low to the water with a flat bottom so they could navigate shallow coastal waters. And these ships were among the first to use watertight bulkheads, which allowed them to stay afloat, even if they sprung a leak. For centuries, Chinese ships had relied on wooden watertight compartments to keep them afloat. But these bulkheads took things one step further, allowing water to be sealed off in a single compartment rather than spreading throughout the whole ship. This made them incredibly hardy and nearly impossible to sink. In fact, a Chinese junk once stayed afloat for 10 days after being hit by a typhoon. Pirate ships, however, didn't exactly have the sturdiest reputations. So when word got out about the Red Fort ships, they were understandably interested. In the meantime, however, pirate ships were usually captured enemy vessels. In the age before GPS, navigation at sea was done with a tool called a quadrant. It was essentially a wooden box with a crosspiece that had a plumb bob hanging from the center. By measuring the angle between the horizon and a celestial body, sailors could calculate their latitude. Unfortunately, accurate quadrants were expensive and difficult to make. So pirates either had to capture ships with working quadrants or fashion their own. Enter the problem with pirate pearls. See, pirates were also fishermen. Fishing provided them with food, which was critical because sailors were notoriously unhealthy. Citrus fruits were the original Gatorade, and the lack of vitamin C in their diets led to scurvy, which killed thousands of sailors every year. But seafood wasn't the only thing they were harvesting. They also harvested pearls. And I know what you're thinking. Wait a second, don't pearls come from oysters? Well, not only do pearls come from freshwater mussels as well. In one species, the freshwater pearl mussel can grow to enormous sizes. Some have weighed over 20 pounds. These mussels were so big, in fact, that pirates actually used them to make fake quadrants. To do this, they'd hollow out the shell and coat the inside with lead foil. Then they'd insert a small window so they could look through it and take sightings. They probably weren't as accurate as their Chinese counterparts, but they got the job done. One of the largest pearl industries was based in Madagascar, run by the notorious pirate king Henry Every. He became famous after leading an attack on the Gangasawai, treasure ship carrying 40 tons of gold and jewels from India to Mecca. After amassing his fortune, he divided his fleet into smaller vessels, which scoured the Indian Ocean trade routes for more treasure. But Henry wasn't above salvaging whatever he could find along the coast. And that included freshwater pearl mussels. Because he commanded such a large fleet, Henry was able to establish a permanent base on land, a pirate headquarters complete with its own currency. He recruited local divers to harvest the giant mussels, which he either used to make fake quadrants or sold to passing ships for real ones. There's also some evidence that pirates dealt in real pearls as well. Not only does a list of stolen goods attributed to the pirate Francois Lelone mention pearl, but the writings of pirate Jean Barbat describe a pearl smuggling operation on the African island of Cape Verde. This trade proved so lucrative, in fact, that slave traders began working with pirates to smuggle pearls into Europe. But how valuable were these pearls? Well, back then, the value of a pearl depended on two things: its color and its size. And the biggest and most valuable pearls were the ones that came from the Red Fort ships. In fact, when pirates brought their bounty ashore, they were sometimes paid in full for their pearls, simply because they were assumed to be the highest quality. But others were less reputable. Those pearls were tested for quality control. One way to determine a pearl's authenticity was to weigh it in vinegar. If it floated, it was a fake. Another test involved scratching a pearl against a hard surface. Genuine pearls would show a slight scuff mark, whereas glass pearls would crack. The Chinese, meanwhile, had developed a sonic test. They believed that each pearl had its own unique song, and that a skilled listener could tell its origin by its sound. We have plenty of evidence that these tests were used on pirate pearls, but we can't say for sure how accurate they were. In the end, it doesn't really matter whether or not they were genuine. After all, if you had a sack of giant freshwater pearls and brought them to shore, you could probably sell them for a lot of money, regardless of whether or not they were real. But what if I told you that pirates were the ones getting hosed? Now, see, Madagascar was controlled by the Portuguese at the time. They had something to say about this illicit pearl trade. When Henry Every died in 1696, his fortune was divided up among his crew. One of his heirs spent several years trying to legitimize his ill-gotten gains, but eventually gave up when he realized how hopeless his case was. However, one pirate pearl made it into the royal court of King William III, according to legend. The king fell in love with the pearl and commissioned a necklace to be made with the gem as its centerpiece. But there's no record of the necklace or the pearl itself. Some historians believe the entire story was just a clever ruse to launder the pirates' treasure. And if that's true, then the very people who had the power to legitimize the pirate pearl trade were the same ones taking advantage of it. Piracy has been romanticized in books and films for centuries, but in reality, life on the open seas was anything but glamorous. Disease was widespread and deadly. Food and water were often contaminated. Crew members routinely died of starvation and exposure. So those who sailed the oceans in the 17th century were often looking for any source of revenue to help support themselves. Pearl diving and smuggling may not have been the most exciting way to make money, but it beat having to plunder another ship or raid a village. But while today we might look back on their entrepreneurial spirit and ingenuity, back then pirates were rarely viewed as anything more than common criminals. They were seen as little better than slaves, hunted down by navies across the globe. Pirates once played a crucial role in suppressing the infamous pirate kingdom of Libertalia, a haven for some of the most notorious pirates in history. But in the end, they proved no match for the combined forces of the British, French, and Portuguese navies. Today, not a single pirate republic exists on Earth. But did you know that the last official pirate is still alive? Meet Sam Bellamy, a former fisherman from Nova Scotia. He was granted letters of marque by King George II of England in 1716. Granting him permission to loot and plunder for the crown, Bellamy plundered anywhere from 40 to 50 ships before his career as a privateer came to an end in 1722. Upon his retirement, he was given noble titles and permission to keep his fortune. He lived to the ripe old age of 84, dying in 1754. Now check out a history of the world in 100 artifacts, or watch Dirty Facts. About the Caribbean you didn't know for a look at the hidden history of the region.